My name is Everett Hutton, and I am 68 years old. I wake up every morning in a room that will never be mine, in a house that once belonged to Priscilla and me. The curtains my late wife picked out are now pulled back by my sister-in-law's hand. The pictures we used to hang together have been replaced with snapshots of someone else's life, where I'm just a random extra in the background. I lie in bed and listen to the house wake up. The creak of floorboards on the second floor is Leonard, my son, rushing to the bathroom. The clinking of dishes in the kitchen. Freya is making breakfast, but not for me. I realized long ago that breakfast was for three: Leonard, Freya, and Tobias, my 15-year-old grandson. A fourth plate for me would have to come by myself. Priscilla died 3 years ago. Cancer left her no chance, and I was left alone in the big three-bedroom house and garden we'd grown together for 37 years. Leonard suggested I move in with them so I wouldn't be alone. At the time, it seemed like an act of caring. Now I realize it was the first step in Freya's strategy. I rented our house to trustworthy people, a married couple of professors from a local college. Leonard didn't know about it. I told him I sold the house, but put the money in the bank at interest. In fact, I get a nice rental income that goes into a separate account, an account that no one knows about except my daughter Odette. It was her advice not to tell her brother about the reality of the situation. "Dad, you can see how Freya looks at your money," Odette said during our last phone conversation. "She's only thinking about what she can get from you." Odette lives in a neighboring state 400 miles away, works as a notary public and doesn't visit much, once every 6 months tops. But she calls every week. Sometimes I think those calls are the only thing keeping me sane. In Leonard's house, I occupy a small room on the first floor, the former guest room. All I can see out the window is the neighbor's fence and a piece of the driveway. Freya said it's the most comfortable place for someone my age. It's hard for you to climb stairs, Everett. I'm 68, and I take a jog around the block every morning when no one sees. My room looks like a hospital room. Minimal stuff, white walls, narrow bed. Freya insisted I leave most of my stuff in storage in the garage. We don't want it to be too cramped, do we? So my books, my vinyl record collection, and the old radio I'd put together with my own hands when I was young ended up packed into cardboard boxes and consigned to a dusty corner. I swing my legs off the bed and pull on my robe. It's time to go out for breakfast. I hear voices in the kitchen, Tobias's laughter. When I walk in, the conversation dies down. "Good morning," I say, trying to sound cheerful. "Morning, Dad." Leonard barely looks up from the phone. He looks like me outwardly, the same deep-set brown eyes, the same shoulder roll. But inwardly, my son has always been closer to his mother, just as soft, accommodating, too compliant. "Everett," Freya nods, and there's more annoyance than welcome in that nod. "Coffee in the coffee pot, toast in the toaster. Can you manage on your own? It's always, can you handle it?" It's like I'm a feeble old man who can't pour himself a cup of coffee. I nod and go to the cupboard for a cup. "Grandpa, I'm going to the robot exhibit at school today. Tobias is the only one who is genuinely happy to see me. Do you want to come with me?" Freya rolls her eyes but doesn't say anything. Leonard stares even deeper into the phone. "I'd love to, grandson," I reply, and Tobias's eyes light up. "Tobias, you have swim practice after school," Freya intervenes. "Have you forgotten?" The light in the boy's eyes goes out. "But Mom, the exhibition is only today." "No buts. Training is more important than some robots." I can see Tobias's lips tighten, the way he wants to argue. But he doesn't dare. I see it, and I don't say anything. I learned a long time ago that my interference would only make things worse. The last time I tried to take my grandson's side in an argument like this, Freya made such a scene that Leonard avoided talking to me for a week. I pour coffee and sit down at the table. No one notices that I forgot to get a plate for toast. I drink my coffee in small sips and watch the family that counts as mine. Freya is in her perfectly pressed business suit. She works as a receptionist at the city hospital. Leonard is in his plaid IT specialist shirt. He does computer network maintenance at the same hospital. That's where they met 10 years ago. Tobias, sandwiched between his parents, furtively glances at me. I wink at him, and he smiles weakly back. Freya notices this silent exchange and presses her lips together irritably. "Tobias, don't forget your lunchbox, and don't buy sodas at school." Yes, Mom, his grandson automatically replies. Leonard, do you remember to stop by the realtors today? Freya asks, and I perk up my ears. We need to discuss options for the sale. What sale? I ask before I can think. Freya throws me a brief glance. We're thinking of buying a bigger house, she says dryly. This one is getting a little cramped for our family. For our family? That phrase doesn't include me. I'm not part of our family. I'm an appendage, a burden to be tolerated for the sake of propriety. And with what money are you going to buy a bigger house, I ask, trying to sound neutral. Leonard finally gets off the phone. Dad, we're just looking at options, nothing concrete. But I can see in Freya's eyes that they've already made up their minds. And I can guess whose money they're counting on. My pension as a hydraulic engineer, my savings, the size of which they can only guess at. They don't know about my stake in Blue Lake Water Company. They don't know about Priscilla's insurance policy, which I invested in stocks and which has tripled in 3 years. They don't know about the rental income from our house. All of these are secrets I keep on Odette's advice. Sometimes I wish I could reveal my cards, show them I'm not the helpless old man they think I am. But I wait. I wait for the right moment. After breakfast, everyone scatters. Leonard and Freya to work, Tobias to school. I'm alone in a house that will never be my home. I go to my room and pull out an old leather diary from under my mattress. In it, I keep notes, not a diary, more like observations, writing down the conversations, the plans Freya makes without realizing I'm listening, writing down the amounts they've spent this month and figuring out where the money came from for the new plasma screen in the living room or Freya's leather boots. Yesterday, I overheard Freya's phone conversation with her mother. Mom, we need to hold out a little longer. The old man won't last forever, and his money will be good for Tobias's college fund. That phrase echoes in my head as I jot it down in my day planner. At 2 in the afternoon, I go out for a walk. It's part of my daily ritual to take an hour-long walk around Blue Lake, the small town I've lived in all my life. I know every street here, every turn. There's a bench at the corner of Maple and Oak Street that overlooks the lake that gave the town its name. I sit there feeding the ducks and thinking about Priscilla. Sometimes I walk past our old house, watching from afar as the professor couple tends the garden that Priscilla and I have spent decades creating. They do it well, respecting our labor, and it makes me feel better. I get home by 4 when Tobias comes home from school. He's the only one I can have a real conversation with. How was the robot exhibit? I ask as he throws his backpack on the couch. I didn't go, he answers bitterly. My mom called the school and said I had practice. I can see the disappointment in his eyes and feel the anger boiling up inside. But I hold back. You know, when I was your age, I built a radio receiver from scratch, I say. It still works. It's in the garage in one of the boxes. Really? Tobias's eyes light up. Can I see it? We go into the garage and I take the old receiver out of the box. I show him how it works, explain the principle. Tobias listens with genuine interest. These moments are the only thing that brightens my life at Leonard and Freya's house. In the evening, when everyone is gathered for dinner, Tobias talks excitedly about the receiver. And Grandpa said we could build one together, he concludes excitedly. Freya gives me a disapproving look. Tobias, you have exams and swimming competitions coming up. No radios. But Mom, I said no. I can see Tobias cringe, and I can't take it. Freya, the boy needs to develop other talents, not just swimming. She looks at me as if I've said something obscene. Don't tell me how to raise my son, Everett. I know what's best for him. You do? I can't contain my sarcasm. Then why does he look so unhappy every time you forbid him from doing something he's interested in? Dad, Leonard intervenes. Don't start, please. There it is. Don't start. Always on my wife's side, never on mine. Priscilla raised a wimp, and now I'm reaping the benefits. Okay, I raise my hands in surrender. I just wanted to spend time with my grandson. You can spend time with him without undermining my authority. Freya cuts me off. The rest of dinner passes in tense silence. Afterward, I retire to my room, pull out my phone, and dial Odette's number. Dad. Her voice sounds worried. What's wrong? Nothing much, I answer. I just wanted to hear your voice. We talk about her work, her cat, the new movie she saw. Not a word about Leonard, Freya, or my life here. It's an unspoken rule of our conversations not to spoil them by discussing my situation. But today I'm breaking that rule. They're planning to buy a bigger house, I say, and I'm pretty sure they're counting on my money. Odette is silent for a few seconds. Daddy, maybe you should move in with me. I have a guest bedroom, and I'd be happy to. No, I interrupt. I don't want to be a burden to you. You're not a burden. She sounds indignant. You're my father, Leonard's father too. But to him, I'm just a source of potential income. We don't speak. I know Odette can't argue. She's seen how I'm treated at her brother's house. I'll come this weekend, she finally says. I want to see you. Don't, honey, you have your own life, your own worries. You're my concern, Dad. I'll be there. Talking to my daughter makes me feel better. Odette always had a way of cheering me up. She's like Priscilla, determined, straightforward. If only Leonard had some of those qualities. Freya and Leonard are planning to buy a bigger house. They're almost certainly counting on my money. Gotta be ready to talk about it. I close the day planner and stash it under my mattress. Lying in bed, I listen to the sounds of the house. Footsteps on the second floor, muffled voices, the sound of water in the pipes. All of these are the sounds of someone else's life, into which I fit no better than an old radio into a modern living room. I fall asleep with the thought that things are about to change. I don't know exactly how, but I sense that the denouement is near, and when it comes, I'll be ready. Tuesday began with rain. I woke to the drumbeat of drops on the windowsill and lay listening to the rhythm, remembering how Priscilla and I loved rainy days. We would make strong tea, pull out board games, and spend hours talking and laughing. In the rain, our house became an especially cozy refuge from the outside world. Here at Leonard's house, the rain only emphasized my alienation. I could hear the family gathering upstairs, hurried footsteps, Freya's cries for Tobias to hurry, Leonard's muffled voice. No one knocks on my door. No one asks if the noise bothers them. To them, I'm already part of the furniture, an old chair they keep for sentimental reasons, but will take to the attic at the first opportunity. I forced myself to get up, pulled on an old sweater, and went into the kitchen. The house was empty. Leonard and Freya had gone to work, Tobias to school. There was a cup of coffee and a plate of leftover toast on the table. They hadn't even left a note for me. I made myself a coffee and sat by the window, looking out at the wet garden. The rain had turned the lawn into a swamp. Freya's flowers wilted under the weight of the water. How symbolic, I thought, sipping the bitter drink. I too felt shabby, wrung out by this house and its inhabitants. A phone call snapped me out of my musings. I reached into my pocket. No, it wasn't my phone. It was the house phone in the hallway. Who would call a landline in the age of cell phones? Hello? I said, picking up the receiver. Freya? It was a woman's voice. No, it was Everett, Leonard's father. Ah, I could hear the disappointment in her voice. This is Penelope, Freya's friend. She's not home right now? No, she's at work, I answered. Can I take a message? Just tell her I called about the meeting today. Thank you. And Penelope hung up. I wrote the message on a Post-it and taped it to the fridge. Then I went back to my coffee, but it was already cold. I poured it in the sink and decided to go for a walk, despite the rain. It was better than sitting inside four walls. I threw on an old raincoat and went outside. The rain drummed on my hood, dripped down my collar, but the cold and damp was almost pleasant. They dulled the dull ache of loneliness that hadn't let go of me in weeks. I took the familiar route to the lake, but halfway there I turned toward the center of town. I had an idea. Check on my bank account. Freya had recently inquired about my finances, supposedly just out of concern, and I wanted to make sure everything was in order. The bank was warm and dry. A young employee with the badge Veronica smiled at me welcomingly. What can I do for you? I'd like to check my account status, I said, holding out my passport. She punched in my information and frowned. Mr. Hutton, there was a request to access your account a week ago. A request? From who? A woman claiming to be your sister-in-law. She said you were unwell and she was handling your affairs. I felt a chill go down my spine. And you gave her the information? No, of course not. Veronica looked offended by the suggestion. We never give information to third parties without a notarized power of attorney. I exhaled with relief. Thank you. And what is the status of my account? She said the amount, a rather modest amount, since I kept the main funds in other accounts that even Odette didn't know about. But even that amount was enough to pique Freya's interest. Leaving the bank, I decided not to return home right away. The rain had almost stopped, turning to a light drizzle. I headed toward a small cafe called Mildred's, an old-fashioned place that Priscilla and I used to frequent. It still made the best apple pie in Blue Lake. Seated at a table by the window, I ordered coffee and a slice of pie. When the waitress, not Mildred, who had died before Priscilla, but her granddaughter Ellie, brought my order, I decided to treat myself a little and asked for a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Bad day, Mr. Hutton? Ellie asked with an understanding smile. Just rainy, I replied, but we both knew it wasn't just the weather. I ate my pie slowly, watching the passers-by through the fogged glass. My thoughts swirled around Freya's attempt to access my accounts. What else was she trying to do behind my back? The phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Odette calling. I picked it up with relief. My daughter's voice always had a calming effect on me. Hi, Dad, she said. How are you? I've been better, I answered honestly. I just found out that Freya was trying to get information about my bank account. What? Odette's voice was metallic. That's illegal. She introduced herself as my sister-in-law and told me I was sick. It's just outrageous. Odette couldn't hide her anger. Dad, I think you should seriously consider moving. I think about it every day, I sighed. No, I mean concrete steps. We could find you an apartment closer to me. Or you could move back into your house, cancel your lease. And then Leonard and Freya would come over every day. Take care of me. No, honey, not now. I have a plan. I heard Odette take a deep breath. You're always talking about a plan, but you never tell me what it is. Because it hasn't been finalized yet, I paused. But I can tell you something. You remember Roy Baxter? Your old colleague from the water company? Sure. I met with him last week. We discussed my stake in the company. He thinks it's a good time to sell because the stock price is high. And you want to sell? Odette sounded surprised. No, I want to increase my stake. Roy's agreed to sell me some of his shares. That would make me the majority shareholder. Dad, this is, unexpected. Why would you do that? I smiled, looking at the raindrops dripping down the window pane. Insurance. And a little pleasure when the time comes. You're speaking in riddles, Odette was clearly puzzled. I know, but I trust your business sense. You've always been good with money. I had a good education, I said, remembering my father, who taught me to value every dollar. Speaking of money, have you heard anything from mutual acquaintances about Leonard and Freya's plans? There was a pause. I knew Odette didn't like to gossip about her brother, but right now information was more important than tact. Actually, yes, she said at last. Margaret Dawson, remember her? She works at the same hospital as Freya. We met by chance at a conference in Seattle last week. And what did she say? Or, Freya was bragging at work that she and Leonard are going to buy a house in Riverside Estates. It's that new neighborhood overlooking the river. Very expensive. When asked where they got that kind of money, she hinted that they had family resources. I felt anger building up inside me. Family resources, then, I said quietly. I wonder what kind of resources. Dad, there's something else. Odette's voice grew serious. Margaret says that Freya has been discussing with some of her colleagues the possibility of getting custody of you. Guardianship? I almost choked on my coffee. I'm of sound mind and good judgment. I know, Dad. But Margaret says Freya consulted a lawyer about the possibility of you being declared incompetent because of your age. Something about senile dementia and having to protect your interests. I squeezed the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It's not going to happen, I said firmly. I'll pass any test, any background check. I read scientific journals, do crossword puzzles, remember all the dates and names. No court will find me incompetent. I know, Dad. I just want you to be careful. Freya won't just stop. She won't, I agreed. But I'll be ready. We talked some more, and Odette promised to come next weekend. I sat in the cafe for a long time afterward, thinking about what I'd heard. The custody plan had been a sneaky but predictable move. Freya had always sought to control everything and everyone around her. But she underestimated me. Seriously underestimated me. I paid and went outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still low and gray. I decided to walk to the water company's office, which was only a few blocks from the cafe. Roy Baxter was glad to see me. He was 5 years older than me, but he looked like a man who would never grow old. Trim, energetic, with a mop of gray hair and lively blue eyes. "Everett," he exclaimed, shaking my hand. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I was in the neighborhood," I said. "How are things going with our agreement?" Roy led me into his office and closed the door. "The papers are almost done. My lawyer promised to have them done by the end of the week. But are you sure you want to do it now?" "I could wait if you need more time to think." "I've never been so sure," I replied. "The money has already been transferred into the account for the deal. As soon as the papers are ready, we can sign." Roy looked at me carefully. "You don't look like a man who increases his business assets for nothing. Is something wrong?" I briefly told him about Freya's plans and the attempt to access my accounts. "Damn it," Roy shook his head. "And this is family?" "You know, my son tried to get into my wallet a couple years ago too. I sent him to work at the company's most remote facility. 6 months in the middle of nowhere cleared his head. We laughed, but I knew Freya's case was more serious. She won't stop until she gets what she wants." "Roy, I need one more thing," I said. "Documents that prove I'm actively involved in the management of the company." "Why? You've always been a passive investor. Times have changed. I want certain people to know that I'm not just a pensioner living on welfare." Roy nodded understandingly. "I can make you a consultant to the board, with a salary and official duties. That would give you the status and credentials you're looking for." "Thank you, friend." I extended my hand and Roy shook it firmly. "I appreciate your help. What else are friends for?" He smiled. "By the way, how about a round of golf on Saturday? The weather's supposed to be nice." "I'd love to," I agreed. I hadn't picked up a club in a long time. Leaving the water company's office, I felt energized. The plan was beginning to take shape. Now I had to prepare a few more details. I decided not to go home right away and headed toward the city library. There was internet and a chance to work quietly without Freya's prying eyes. At the library, I spent a few hours researching information about elder guardianship laws and cases challenging such decisions. Then I wrote a long letter to my attorney, describing the situation and asking for advice. At the end, I added a request to prepare a new will. The previous one I'd made while Priscilla was still alive was in need of major revisions. It was nearly 6 o'clock in the evening when I left the library. It was drizzling rain, but I didn't care. I had a clear plan of action in my head, and it was empowering. On my way home, I passed the Blue Whale, the bar where the hospital workers often gathered after their shifts. Through the window, I saw Freya sitting at a table with a red-haired woman, probably the same Penelope who'd called this morning. I slowed my step, not wanting to be seen. The women were talking animatedly about something, and Freya was laughing, sincerely, openly, not at all like she did at home. I was about to move on when I noticed that the window of the bar was ajar, and I could hear bits of conversation. "In a month, 2 at the most," Freya said. "The lawyer said that with a medical report, the process would go quickly." "And you are sure that the doctor will give such an opinion?" Penelope asked. Dr. Ellison owes me." Freya lowered her voice, but I could still hear it. "Sekonim, remember the story about the drugs on the ward? I could have reported it to the head doctor, but I didn't. Now it's his turn to do the favor. And your husband? Is he on board with this plan?" Freya waved it off. "Leonard does as I say. He's always been a mama's boy, and now I've replaced his mommy." She grinned. "He'll sign anything I put in front of him." "And how much will you get if it all works out?" "The old man never talks about money, but he must have a decent amount set aside. Plus the engineer's pension, plus some stocks he mentioned. Enough for a house in Riverside Estates and a private school for Tobias." "And if he resisted?" Freya took a sip from her glass and smiled coldly, calculatingly. "Everett is 68. He's had several cases of vertigo in the past year. I work in a hospital and I know which drugs can cause the right symptoms. A little dizziness, a fall, maybe a little disorientation. Dr. Ellison will see exactly what's needed." I felt a chill go down my spine. Freya wasn't just planning on getting custody. She was ready to fudge the medical records, maybe even slip something into my food or drink. "Aren't you afraid that's Too much? Penelope's voice sounded doubtful. Too much? Freya snorted. Leonard and I have put up with this old man for 7 years, providing for him, caring for him. He owes us a debt, and then I'm not going to kill him, just give him a little push toward the inevitable. He's already got 1 foot in the grave anyway. I backed away from the window, feeling nauseous. Is this woman really married to my son? Had my gentle, kind Leonard chosen such a monster? I walked quickly away, not making my way. The rain intensified, but I didn't notice it. Freya's words rang in my head. 1 foot in the grave. A little push toward the inevitable. She was willing to poison me for a house and money. I found myself in the small park where Priscilla and I often walked. I sat down on a bench, ignoring the wet wood, and pulled out my phone. My hands shook as I dialed Odette's number. Dad? She answered almost immediately. What's wrong? I need to get out of here, I said, trying to speak calmly. Tonight. What happened? Odette sounded worried. I told her briefly about the conversation I'd overheard. With each word, my daughter's voice grew more and more tense. That? She said a word I'd never heard her say before. I'm leaving right now. I'll be at your place in 5 hours. No, I stopped her. Don't come. I have another plan. What other plan? Dad, she's going to poison you. Not today, I said. We have time. I'll spend the night at the hotel and then tomorrow. Dad, please be careful. Maybe we should go to the police. With what? I have no proof, just an overheard conversation. We didn't talk for a while. Then I said, I've got a better idea, but I need your help. Anything, Odette said without hesitation. Can you come over on Friday? I want to have a family dinner, and I need you to bring some documents from my safe. Remember I gave you the key last year? Of course I do. What kind of papers? I listed the papers I needed. With each document named, Odette's voice grew more surprised. Dad, are you sure? That's, pretty drastic. I'm absolutely sure, I answered. Freya wants a war? She'll get it. We discussed the details of the plan, and I felt myself regaining control of the situation. By the time we finished talking, the rain had stopped, and the first stars could be seen in the gaps between the clouds. I headed toward a small hotel in the center of town. They knew me there. Priscilla and I sometimes stayed there on our wedding anniversary, giving ourselves a little celebration. When I checked in, I asked the receptionist not to inform anyone of my stay. Then I went up to my room, took a hot shower, and got into bed. Despite my fatigue and shock, I felt strangely energized. For the first time in a long time, I was making decisions for myself, acting rather than reacting. Before I went to bed, I sent a quick text to Leonard. Met up with an old friend. I'm staying the night at his place. No worries. I knew Leonard wouldn't be bothered, more likely to be glad I was gone. And Freya? Well, let her wonder if I'd overheard her plans. Tomorrow I'll start preparing for the decisive step. In the meantime, I can afford to rest. I closed my eyes, imagining Freya's face when she realized she'd miscalculated. That was my last thought before I fell into a deep, restful sleep. I spent the next 3 days preparing for the decisive step. I spent most of my time away from Leonard and Freya's house, returning only late at night. I slept in my room, but ate lunch and dinner in town. Freya squinted at me suspiciously, but asked no questions. I could see her watching me when she thought I didn't notice. Tense, wary. Perhaps she feared I had overheard something that night at the Blue Whale. Leonard, as always, was immersed in his thoughts and work, paying almost no attention to me. Only Tobias seemed genuinely happy to see me, especially when I brought him a new book on robotics. That's cool, Grandpa, he exclaimed, flipping through the pages. It even has diagrams for self-assembly. I thought you might like it, I smiled. Mator, maybe we could put something together this weekend. His face brightened, but then darkened. Mom says I have a swimming competition. What if we put the robot together after the competition? I suggested it. I'll come cheer you on, and then we can build it. Tobias thought about it. I guess we could do that, he said uncertainly. If Mom says it's okay. I patted him on the shoulder, not promising anything. I had other plans for the weekend, plans that would completely change our family's life. Thursday night, I got a call from Roy Baxter. The papers are ready, Yasani, he said. You can come by tomorrow to sign them. Great, I said. I'll be at your place at 10. That evening, Odette called to confirm my arrival. I'm leaving early in the morning, and I'll be there by lunchtime, she said. I got the paperwork together like you asked. Good. I lowered my voice even though I was in my room with the door closed. Remember, don't tell anyone you're coming. It's supposed to be a surprise. Dad, are you sure this is necessary? Wouldn't it be easier to just move in with me? And let Freya think she's won? I shook my head even though my daughter couldn't see it. No, sweetie. She needs to realize who she's messing with. Odette sighed. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. Friday morning, I went to the water company's office and signed the papers that increased my stake in the company to 51%, making me the majority shareholder. Roy also handed me papers appointing me as a consultant to the board at a very handsome salary. Congratulations, boss, he grinned, shaking my hand. You are now officially the most powerful man in Blue Lake's water supply. Thanks, Roy. I folded the papers neatly into a folder. It means more to me than you know. After the water company, I stopped by the bank, where I prepared some bank statements to confirm my financial status. Then I stopped by my attorney's office to pick up a new will he had prepared at my request. I put all these documents in a leather folder, which I then stashed in the trunk of my old but reliable Toyota. I arrived at Leonard's house around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There was an unfamiliar car in the driveway, Odette's rental car, so the daughter had already arrived. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was going to happen that evening. The plan was simple: a family dinner, during which Freya probably wouldn't hold back on her barbs at me. I'd tolerate it up to a certain point, and then, well, let it be a surprise. As I entered the house, I heard voices coming from the living room. Odette was talking animatedly with Tobias, and Freya was sitting off to the side with a sour expression. My daughter never hid her dislike for her brother's wife, but she always tried to be polite for the sake of family peace. Dad! Odette jumped up when she saw me and rushed over to hug me. I missed you so much. I missed you too, honey. I hugged my daughter tightly. She looked so much like her mother. The same brown hair, the same clear eyes, the same determination in her chin. Minus surprise. Odette smiled. I decided to come down for the weekend to check on you all. Very unexpected, Freya hissed, pulling a smile. You could have given me a heads up. I would have had the guest room ready. Oh, don't worry, Odette waved her hand. I'll stay at the hotel. I don't want to embarrass anyone. I noticed Freya tense at those words. Of course, she didn't like that Odette had chosen a hotel over their house. It could be interpreted as criticism of her hospitality. Nonsense, Freya said with feigned indignation. Your family. Of course you're staying here. Really? Odette sounded feigned surprise. Well, if you insist. I suppressed a smile. Odette was playing her part perfectly. Freya was now forced to accept her into the house, even though she clearly didn't want to. Grandpa, Aunt Odette said, she'd brought me a book about space. Tobias intervened, tugging on my sleeve. She did. How wonderful. I winked at my grandson. Will you show it to me later? Sure, there are real pictures of black holes in there. Freya coughed. Tobias, shouldn't you be getting ready for your evening practice? But it's Friday. I don't have practice on Fridays, the boy objected. Coach Peterson has organized an extra session for those who want to improve their performance. Freya cut him off. You do, don't you? I saw the enthusiasm fade in my grandson's eyes. He gave me and Odette an apologetic look and went upstairs. Speaking of tonight, Freya said when Tobias was out of sight, I was planning to make a special dinner tonight. Leonard should be back by 6, and we have some news we want to share. News, I asked, already guessing what it was about. Yes, but it's a surprise, Freya smiled enigmatically. You'll have to wait until dinner. I nodded without saying a word. Let her think she had it under control. Pretty soon she'd find out how wrong she was. Afterward, Odette dragged me to my room, ostensibly to show me pictures of her new apartment. What we really wanted to do was discuss a plan of action in private. Did you bring the papers? I asked in a whisper as the door closed. Odette nodded. It's all in my bag in the car. Should I get it? Not right now. We'll wait until after dinner. I want them on hand, but not in the house. My daughter took a good look at me. Dad, are you feeling okay? You look tense. I'm perfectly fine, I assured her. Just getting ready for what's going to happen tonight. What's going to happen? You still haven't given me all the details. I smiled. You'll see. Just be ready to support me no matter what happens. Odette nodded, though there was worry in her eyes. The rest of the day passed in tense anticipation. Freya fussed in the kitchen, preparing dinner and occasionally casting suspicious glances at Odette and me. Tobias had returned from what she called extra training. In fact, I was sure there was no training. Freya just wanted to get the boy out of sight. Leonard arrived home from work around 6, surprised by Odette's presence, but quickly recovered and even looked pleased. Maybe he hoped his sister would lighten the atmosphere, which had been particularly tense in recent days. By 7 o'clock in the evening, the table was set. Freya had done her best. Baked chicken, potato gratin, avocado salad, a bottle of expensive wine. She was clearly trying to impress Odette, or perhaps to celebrate in advance her future victory over me. We were seated around the table, Leonard at the head, Freya to his right, me across from her, Odette beside me, Tobias between his mother and aunt. Before we begin, Leonard said, raising his glass, I would like to propose a toast to our family, to being together in these difficult times. I suppressed a chuckle. Difficult times? Was that what he'd called the situation when his wife was planning to poison his father? To family, everyone echoed, raising their glasses. I pretended to drink, but actually only touched my lips to the wine. After overhearing Freya and her friend talking, I didn't trust anything served in this house. For a while we ate in silence. Then Freya cleared her throat. Leonard and I would like to share some news with you, she said, smiling. We found a house, the perfect home for our family. Really? Odette raised her eyebrows. What kind of house? In Riverside Estates, Leonard replied, clearly proud of himself. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, pool, river view. It's a dream come true. And how do you plan to pay for it? Odette asked bluntly, ignoring the warning look I threw at her. This was not the moment I'd chosen for a confrontation. Leonard choked on his wine, and Freya pressed her lips together. We have saving, she said evasively, and the bank offered a very favorable mortgage. Dash. Really, question mark, Odette looked skeptical. It must be very favorable. Houses like this are worth a fortune. We've got it under control. Freya cut her off. Besides, she glanced at me, we're counting on family support. This is it, the moment I'd been waiting for. Family support? I asked innocently. What do you mean by that, Freya? She hesitated, clearly not expecting a direct question. Well, you always said you wanted to help Tobias with his education, with his future. This house is an investment in his future. The best neighborhood, the best school nearby. Ah, I said, so you're counting on my money. There was silence at the table. Leonard stared at his plate. Tobias looked from one adult to the next, not sure what was going on. Odette watched the scene with intense scrutiny. You don't have to put the question so bluntly, Freya finally said. We're a family. We support each other, do we? I put my fork down. And how exactly have you been supportive of me, Freya? Maybe when you tried to get my bank account information without my knowledge? Or when you consulted a lawyer to see if I could be declared incompetent? Freya's face turned pale, then red. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice trembled. You don't? I smiled. Or maybe you don't know about the conversation with Penelope at the Blue Whale either. About how you planned to slip me drugs to induce symptoms of dementia? How you said I had 1 foot in the grave? What? Leonard exclaimed, raising his eyes from his plate for the first time. Freya, is it true? Of course not. She tried to laugh, but it was fake. Your father is making it up. You know, at his age, people sometimes get confused. I'm not confused, I said firmly, and I have proof. The bank confirmed that you came by trying to get my account information. And about the conversation with Penelope, I recorded it on my phone. That was a lie. I didn't record the conversation, but Freya couldn't know that, and I could see the panic flicker in her eyes. It's a misunderstanding, she mumbled. I only wanted to help. Help myself, to my house, to my money, I finished for her. Admit it, Freya. You never saw me as family, just a burden you wanted to get rid of as soon as I was no longer useful. That's not true, she exclaimed. but there was guilt in her eyes. Dash, dash. Mom ? Tobias's voice was quiet, frightened. Did you really say that about grandfather? Freya jerked as if struck by a blow. Her mask slipped for a moment, and I saw the fury in her eyes. Enough! She slammed her palm on the table. You old, out-of-your-mind manipulator. Yes, I said you were a burden. Because you are. You live in our house, eat our food, use our things. But what do you give in return? Nothing. Only complaints and criticism. Freya! Leonard tried to stop her, but she wasn't herself anymore. 7 years, she continued to scream. 7 years we've put up with you, looked after you, and you haven't even thought of thanking us. You have money, a house, stocks, we know that. But you hang on to it all like a cheapskate instead of helping your own son. I sat still, letting her vent her bile. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Odette clench her fists, but she kept quiet, just like we agreed. You know what? Freya stood up, hovering over the table. You're right. I do consider you a burden. You are a burden to my family. Get out. Get out of my house and never come back. There was dead silence in the room. Leonard sat with his head down. Tobias wept quietly. Odette looked at Freya with undisguised disgust. And I smiled. A calm, confident smile. Your house? I asked softly. But it's not your home, Freya. It's my house. I bought it for Leonard when you two got married, but I deeded it to myself. Check the deeds if you don't believe me. Freya froze with her mouth open. What? And you know, I continued in the same calm tone, you shouldn't have done that to me. I own not only this house, but the Blue Lake Water Company, and now you're going to find out what a real burden is. I took the car keys out of my pocket and handed them to Odette. Honey, could you get the folder from the trunk? Odette nodded and got out. We all sat in silence until she returned with a leather folder, which she handed to me. What is it? Leonard asked in a husky voice. Evidence, I answered, opening the folder. The deeds to the house, proving that I own it. The deeds to the water company, where I'm the majority shareholder as of today. Bank statements showing my true financial status. And I pulled out the last document, my new will, making Odette and Tobias my sole heirs. Freya stared at me with her mouth open. Her face turned white as chalk. You can't. I can, I interrupted her. And I already did. You know, Freya, I was never the helpless old man you thought I was. I was a water engineer, one of the best in the state. I founded the water company 35 years ago with Roy Baxter. Priscilla and I put every dime of our savings into that business, risked everything, and now that company is worth millions. I looked at my son. Leonard, I always hoped you'd take an interest in the family business, but you chose a different path, and I respected that choice. I never forced my ambitions on you, but I expected at least some respect in return. Respect I didn't get. Leonard lowered his eyes. He looked lost, broken. I had planned to split the company between you and Odette, I continued. But after everything that happened, after you let your wife schedule my medical exam without my knowledge, after you never once stood up for me, I reconsidered my decision. I put my hand on Tobias's shoulder, who was still sobbing quietly. Don't worry, grandson. Your share of the inheritance awaits you when you come of age. And I promise that I will never leave you, no matter what happens. Freya's finally regained her voice. You're bluffing, she hissed. It's all a lie, a trick to scare us. In response, I silently laid the documents on the table, one by one. The certificate of title to the house, the stock certificate of the water company, bank statements with six-figure sums. Odette looked at me in surprise. She knew about some of my assets, but not all of them. Not about how much I actually had. Daddy, she whispered, why didn't you ever speak up? I didn't want to be loved for money, I answered simply. I wanted to make sure I was loved for who I was. Odette's gaze filled with understanding and sympathy. She covered my hand with hers. What now? Leonard asked in a muffled voice. Are you going to kick us out of the house? I looked at my son for a long moment. Despite everything, he was my flesh and blood. The son I loved, despite his weakness. No, I said at last. But the terms will change. Starting tomorrow, I'm moving into my house, the one I've been renting out all these years. The tenant's contract expires at the end of the month, and they've already found another place to live. And you, I looked around at Leonard and Freya, you can stay here, but you'll be paying rent. Market rate. Freya made a sound like a suppressed groan. It's not fair, she whispered. We can't. Not fair? I raised an eyebrow. It's not fair to plan custody of a person against their will. It's not fair to discuss how to put him on medication to make him look incapacitated. It's not fair to call him a liability when he's sitting at your desk. That's what's unfair, Freya. I rose from the desk, gathering the papers back into the folder. I'll sleep here tonight, I said. I'll leave tomorrow. Odette will help me move. My daughter nodded, looking at me with renewed respect. One more thing, I added, turning to Freya. I know about your plans for the house and Riverside Estates. You can forget about them. You won't get a dime of my money. Ever. With those words, I walked out of the dining room, leaving a stunned silence behind me. Only as I closed the door of my room behind me did I hear the sound of Freya's sobs and Leonard's quiet, shaken voice repeating, "What have you done? What have you done?" I sat down on the bed, suddenly feeling very old and very tired, but at the same time, free. For the first time in years, I had made a life-changing decision, and now in that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The night after dinner passed in a strange, oppressive silence. I lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the house, the muffled voices coming from the second floor, the quiet crying, the footsteps. Sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed the events of the evening over and over again. Freya's face contorted with rage, Leonard's shocked look, Tobias's tears. I felt no triumph, only fatigue, and a strange desolation. Saturday morning greeted me with gray light and drizzling rain. Perfect moving weather. No bright colors, no sunshine, just muted tones to match my mood. I got up earlier than usual, around 6 in the morning, and started packing. There wasn't much. Clothes, a few books, a photo album with Priscilla, an old day planner where I wrote down my observations. Everything fit into 2 suitcases. When I went into the kitchen, Odette was already there, making coffee. She turned around at the sound of my footsteps and smiled, a little sad, but understanding. "Good morning, Dad," she said quietly. "How did you sleep?" "Almost nothing," I answered honestly, sitting down at the table. "And you?" "Not so good either. I heard Freya and Leonard fighting all night." I nodded. That was to be expected. Are you sure you want to leave tonight?" Odette asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. "Maybe we should wait a little while for things to settle down." I shook my head. "No, the decision's been made. I can't stay here after last night. I don't want to." Odette sat down across from me, both hands on her cup, as if trying to keep warm. "You know," she said after a pause, "I've always guessed that you have some means you don't talk about, but I never realized that you were so well off." I shrugged my shoulders. "I've never put a lot of importance on money. It was more important to your mother and me that you and Leonard grow up to be good people, not that they knew about our financial situation." "And yet," Odette frowned, "why didn't you ever tell me about the company? About how much you really have?" I sipped my coffee, gathering my thoughts. "At first, I didn't want it to affect your parenting. Then your mom died, and I saw the way Freya looked at me, not as a person, but as a purse on legs. So I decided to see which of my children loved me for my own sake, not for my money. And Leonard failed that test," Odette finished quietly. "Not exactly," I sighed. "Leonard is just a weak man. He'd always been like that. Too malleable, too compliant. You and Mom were strong. She always knew what she wanted. And so do you. And Leonard, I think he was looking for the same strength in Freya that he saw in his mother. What he didn't realize was that strength can be different." We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in his own thoughts. Then Odette asked, "So where are we going today? You were talking about the house you were renting out?" "Not exactly," I smiled weakly. "It's a different house. The mansion on Lakeview Drive." Odette's eyes widened. "The white mansion with the columns? But it cost a fortune. I bought it 3 years ago, right after Priscilla died. I thought I might move there someday, but I never did." Too many memories of our old house. But why haven't you lived there all this time? Why did you stay with Leonard and Freya? I sighed, twirling the cup in my hands. At first, I really didn't want to be alone. Then I started noticing how Freya was treating me, so I decided to check it out, see how far she was willing to go. I looked into my daughter's eyes. Admittedly, it wasn't the best decision, but I couldn't believe my son's wife would be capable of such calculating. Odette put her hand over mine. It's not your fault, Dad. Freya made her choice. So did Leonard, I added. He could have stopped her, but he didn't. Tobias entered the kitchen at that moment. The boy looked pale and sleep-deprived, his eyes red from crying. Grandfather, he said quietly, is it true you're leaving? I nodded, feeling my heart clench at the sight of his saddened face. Yes, Tobias, but that doesn't mean we won't see each other. I promise I'll come to your swim meets, and you can come visit me whenever you want. Really? There was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Would Mom let me? I exchanged glances with Odette. We both knew Freya wouldn't be thrilled with the idea. We'll think of something, I promised. Maybe your Aunt Odette could bring you. Tobias cast a grateful glance at Odette, who smiled back at him. I'll always find a way to see my favorite nephew, she winked. I'm your only nephew, Tobias remarked with a faint smile. All the more so. This small moment of levity was interrupted by Leonard's appearance. My son looked like he'd been up all night, exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. Daddy, he said, stopping in the kitchen doorway. Can I talk to you? I nodded, rising from the table. Tobias, will you help Aunt Odette make breakfast? I asked, and the boy nodded, clearly glad to have something constructive to do. Leonard and I went out into the living room. His son was fidgeting with the hem of his shirt, a habit he'd had since he was a child. Dad, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything, I replied calmly. My decision is made. But this is all we have, he sounded desperate. The house, Tobias's college fund. You have a job, Leonard. Freya has a job, too. You both make a good salary. If you can't afford this house, get a smaller apartment. After all we've done for you, he started, but I interrupted him. What exactly have you done for me, Leonard? Put me up in a house I bought myself? Let me eat at your table while your wife planned how to declare me incompetent? Or maybe you mean the times she humiliated me in front of Tobias and you kept quiet? Leonard lowered his eyes. I didn't know about her plans, I swear. You didn't know or you didn't want to know, I asked. Did you ever wonder why Freya is so interested in my finances? Why she's always talking about my age and health? My son was silent, and I could see in his face that he had always guessed, just didn't want to admit the truth. Whatever happens, Leonard, you're my son, I said more gently, and I'm not going to leave you completely unsupported, but that support will be my decision, not Freya's. What do you mean? I'll pay for Tobias's college when the time comes. I'll set up a trust fund in his name, and I won't kick you out of the house. You can continue to live here, paying a reasonable rent. And the company? Leonard asked. Your share in the water company? It will go to Odette, I said firmly. She's always been interested in business, unlike you, and she wasn't trying to manipulate me for an inheritance. Leonard looked as if I'd slapped him. You always preferred her, he whispered. Always thought she was better than me. I shook my head. No, son. I loved you both equally. But Odette wouldn't let her spouse plan how to spike my meds to get my money. That's the difference. He couldn't find anything to say, and we stood in silence. The two Huttons, father and son, suddenly almost strangers to each other. I'll be ready in an hour, I said at last. Odette will help me with my things. Leonard nodded and left the room, slouching like an old man. I felt sorry for him, but not sorry enough to change my mind. After breakfast, which passed in tense silence, Freya never showed up, apparently not wanting to see me. Odette and I loaded my few belongings into her rental car. Tobias helped us, diligently lugging light bags and boxes. Before leaving, I lingered in my room, taking one last look around. Nothing here said that I had spent 3 years of my life within these walls. Not a single personal item, not a single photograph on the walls. The room looked as impersonal as the day I arrived. I walked out into the courtyard, where Odette was already waiting for me in the car. Tobias was standing next to me, shuffling from foot to foot. "Are you sure you're coming to my competition?" he asked as I approached. "I will," I hugged my grandson. "Next Saturday, right? I'll be in the stands, I promise." The boy hugged me back tightly, and I felt his shoulders shudder with held-back sobs. "Hey," I pulled back to look into his face. "This isn't goodbye. We'll see each other often, I promise." Tobias nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "I love you, grandfather." "I love you too, grandson," I replied, feeling my throat constrict. Leonard stood in the doorway of the house, watching the scene. I waved at him. He waved back after a second's hesitation. Freya still hadn't shown up. Odette and I got into the car and started driving. I watched in the side mirror as Tobias's figure faded, waving at us, as the house where I'd spent the last 3 years of my life disappeared from view. Strangely, I felt no regret or sadness, just relief. "How are you?" Odette asked as we pulled onto the main road. "Free," I answered. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. We drove toward Lakeview Drive, a quiet, upscale neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. The road looped between the hills, occasionally offering beautiful views of the lake that gave our town its name. The autumn trees were flaming with all shades of red and gold, and the low clouds gave the landscape a kind of watercolor softness. "So," Odette said, breaking the silence, "tell me about the house. I didn't even know you'd bought it." "It was an impulse," I admitted. "After Priscilla died, I couldn't be in our old house. Too many memories. But I didn't want to move in with Leonard either. Then I saw an ad for the mansion, and I just bought it." "And you never lived there?" "No. I hired a designer to furnish it and a maintenance company, but I didn't dare. And then Leonard insisted I move in with them, and it was embarrassing to admit I had another place to live." Odette shook her head. "You're full of surprises, Dad." I smiled. "Life is boring without surprises, honey." Soon we turned onto a wide driveway lined with old maple trees. At the end of the driveway, we saw the house, a white Georgian mansion with columns and a wide porch. It stood on a small hill overlooking the lake. "Oh my God," Odette exhaled, stopping the car in front of the house. "This is impressive." I nodded, looking at my house, which I'd only seen a few times before. It was beautiful, grand but not pretentious, elegant but cozy. We got out of the car and walked up the porch steps. I pulled out the key I'd kept in a safety deposit box all these years and opened the door. The inside of the house was as beautiful as the outside. A spacious hallway with marble floors, a wide staircase leading to the second floor, bright rooms, tastefully furnished, but not overly luxurious. The designer followed my instructions perfectly. The house looked lived in, cozy, but not overloaded with details. "This place is amazing," Odette said as she looked around. "But isn't it too big for one person?" "Maybe," I agreed. "But I thought you could stay here sometimes. Tobias, too. There are 5 bedrooms, plenty of room for everyone." Odette smiled. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I try," I shrugged. We moved my things out of the car and sat in the living room with cups of tea. The panoramic windows overlooked the lake, the sun shining through the clouds. "So," said Odette, "what now? Are you really going to hand over the company to me?" I nodded. "Yes. Not right away, of course. First, I'll bring you up to speed, introduce you to Roy and the other partners. But eventually, yes, the company will be yours. And Leonard?" She looked worried. "He's your kid, too." I sighed, staring out the window at the distant lake. "I won't deprive him completely. As I said, I'll pay for Tobias's education and leave him a portion of the inheritance. But the main assets will go to you. You've always been interested in business. You have business acumen. And Leonard's always been more dreamer than practitioner. And yet, doesn't that strike you as, cruel?" I thought about her question. Was my decision cruel? Maybe, but it was fair. "You know," I said at last, "when your mother died, I thought about justice for a long time. Why did she, so kind, so full of life, have to go so soon? Why didn't she and I get another 20 years together, like we'd planned? It wasn't fair." I paused for a moment. And then I realized that fairness isn't when everyone gets an equal share. It's when everyone gets what they deserve. Odette was silent, listening to me intently. Leonard let his wife plan how to take control of my life away from me, I continued. He didn't stop her when she called me a burden. He didn't protect me, his father. That's his choice. And now he has to live with the consequences. What about forgiveness? Odette asked quietly. Mom always said that forgiveness frees the one who forgives in the first place. I smiled, remembering Priscilla. She really did say that. Perhaps one day I would forgive him, but not right now. Right now, I just want him to realize that actions have consequences. We finished our tea in thoughtful silence. Then Odette helped me unpack and settle into the master bedroom. The room was spacious, with a large bed and a private bath. It overlooked the garden down to the lake. You know, Odette said when we were done, Mom would be proud of you. Not for the money or the house, but for finally standing up for yourself. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. It means a lot to me. That evening, after Odette left for the hotel, she'd insisted on it, saying I needed time to settle into my new home. I sat on the terrace watching the sunset over the lake. The air was cool but not cold, filled with the sense of fall. Fallen leaves, damp earth, a distant campfire. I thought of Priscilla, of our life together, of the children we'd raised. Odette took after her mother, just as strong, direct, honest. Leonard was always softer, more vulnerable. Maybe we spoiled him too much. Maybe I should have been stricter, more demanding. But you can't change the past. And now, looking up at the darkening sky, I felt a strange peace. I had done what I had to do, protected myself, protected my dignity. Yes, it had hurt my son, and I was sorry for that. But sometimes pain is necessary for growth. Leonard had a choice to make: continue to let Freya manipulate him, or finally become the man Priscilla and I had hoped to raise him to be. What his choice would be, I didn't know. But I gave him a chance to see the truth, and that was all I could do. I entered the house when it was completely dark. The mansion seemed huge and empty, filled with shadows and the echo of my footsteps. But it was a good emptiness, a space that was to be filled with new memories, a new life. Before I went to bed, I pulled out a picture of Priscilla, the one I always kept next to my bed, even at Leonard's house. Her smile, frozen in the photo, seemed to say, "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." "I miss you," I whispered, touching my fingers to the glass. "I hope you would approve of my actions." As I fell asleep in my new bed, in my new home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness at being separated from my son, relief at being rid of the toxic atmosphere, anxiety for Tobias's future, hope for a new chapter in my life. But through all these feelings, one clear thought shone through. I was no longer a victim. I had taken back control of my life. And whatever happened next, I was ready to face it with my head held high. Sunday morning, I met in my new home. The unfamiliar silence, the absence of Freya's irritated voice commanding everyone around me, all of it created a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I brewed myself some coffee and went out onto the terrace. The weather was clear, sunny but cool, a typical fall day in Blue Lake. The lake below shimmered like molten silver, and the distant hills were shrouded in a light haze. I took a deep breath of fresh air. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. No one watched me with suspicion. No one commented on my every action. No one made me feel like a burden. I could do what I wanted, when I wanted, and I didn't have to explain my decisions to anyone. The ringing of the phone broke my musings. It was Odette. "Good morning, Dad," her voice sounded cheerful. "How was your first night in the new house?" "Surprisingly well," I replied. "Like I'd always lived here." "That's good to hear. I'll stop by in an hour if you don't mind. I want to make sure you have everything you need before I leave." "Sure, I'll be waiting." After the call, I ate breakfast and walked around the house, really exploring it for the first time. The designer I'd hired 3 years ago had done an excellent job. Every room was furnished tastefully, but not flashy. The library with its tall bookcases was filled with exactly the kind of books I like to read. The study had a massive mahogany desk, just like the one my father had. The kitchen was equipped with everything I needed. Though I doubted I'd cook much, I'd never been much of a cook. Odette arrived as promised an hour later. She brought groceries and a few necessities. "You know I could have bought all this stuff myself, right?" I said as I helped her unload the bags. "I know," she smiled, "but I wanted to help." We sat in the living room with cups of fresh coffee. Odette looked thoughtful. "Dad," she began after a pause, "I got a call from Leonard this morning." I tensed up. "What did he want?" "He wanted to know how you were settling in, if everything was okay." She paused. "And he wanted to know if he could come by your place today to talk." I chuckled. It was amazing how quickly he'd woken up to caring about me. "He seemed genuinely concerned," Odette said, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "What did you say to him?" "I told him I'd ask you. That it was up to you to decide if you wanted to see him." I wondered, looking out the window at the calm surface of the lake. Did I want to see Leonard? Part of me, the fatherly part, missed my son. But the other part, the part that had been so deeply wounded by his betrayal, shuddered at the thought of meeting him. "Tell him I'm not ready yet," I finally decided. "I need time." Odette nodded understandingly. "Good, I'll tell him that." We spent the morning discussing the various details of my new life. Odette insisted on hiring an au pair to come a couple times a week. I agreed, although I said I was perfectly capable of keeping things in order. But Odette was adamant. "The house is too big for you to take care of by yourself," she said. "Besides, it would keep you company." After lunch, Odette left for the long drive home. "I'll call every day," she promised, hugging me goodbye. "And I'll come back in 2 weeks for the weekend." "You don't have to worry so much," I smiled. "I'm not a helpless old man." "I know," she replied seriously, "but you're my father, and I love you." After Odette left, the house fell into silence again. I decided to take a walk in the garden down to the lake. The paths were paved with stone slabs with grass between them. The apple, pear, and cherry trees, which had already shed most of their leaves, stood bare, silhouetted against the sky. At the water's edge was a small pier with a gazebo. I was sitting there watching the seagulls when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. As I walked back to the house, I saw Leonard's car in the driveway. My son was standing beside it, shuffling nervously from foot to foot. "Dad," he said when he saw me, "I know you told Odette to tell me you weren't ready to see me, but I had to come." I sighed. I could turn around and walk away, but that would be too cruel. "Okay," I said. "Since you're here, come on in." We walked into the house. Leonard looked around with ill-concealed surprise. "Impressive," he muttered. "I never would have guessed that that I had that kind of money," I finished for him. "Yes, your mother and I have always tried to live modestly, not because we couldn't afford more, but because we didn't see the point." I led him into the living room and invited him to sit down. Leonard looked out of place in the elegant room, in his worn jacket, his hair disheveled and his face haggard. "Tea? Coffee?" I offered. "No, thank you." He shook his head. "I won't be long. I just wanted to, talk." I sat down in the chair across from him and stared at him expectantly. Leonard rubbed his hands together nervously. "Dad, I want to apologize for everything that happened, for the way Freya treated you, for not stopping her. I was a blind idiot." I scrutinized his face, trying to see the sincerity. Was it there? Maybe, but there was something else too. A calculation, a wariness, like a man trying to regain lost ground. "And what made you see," I asked, "my revelation about the condition, or the fact that you were now disinherited?" Leonard flinched as if struck by a blow. "It's not fair, Dad." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But was it fair to let your wife plan to declare me incapacitated?" He lowered his head. "I didn't know about it. I swear I didn't." "Sure, but I guessed," I said softly. I couldn't help but guess Leonard. Freya wasn't being very secretive about me. He was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "How's Tobias?" I asked, changing the subject. "Depressed," Leonard said. "He misses you. He keeps asking when you're coming to visit." I felt a prick in my heart. My grandson, the innocent victim of adult games and ambition. "I promised him I'd come to the swimming competition next Saturday," I said. "And I'll keep my promise. He'll be glad." Leonard nodded. "Dad, I understand that you're angry with Freya and me, and you have every right to be. But maybe we could start over." I could bring Tobias over on weekends. We could have lunch together once a week. Freya, she's changed since you left. She's realized her mistakes. I raised an eyebrow. She has? And how does that translate into what? Leonard hesitated. She, she doesn't talk bad about you anymore, and she agrees that Tobias should spend time with you. How generous of her. I couldn't hide the irony. What about the house in Riverside Estates? Was she still planning to buy it? A shadow flickered across Leonard's face. No, of course not. We realize it was unwise. Unwise, I repeated. Interesting choice of word. Not wrong or selfish, but unwise. Because now that you know you won't get my money, such a purchase has become impossible? Dad, please, Leonard sounded desperate. I'm trying to make this work. I know Freya and I were wrong. We want to make things right. I looked at my son, broken, pleading, but still not understanding exactly what his mistake was. He was remorseful, not for letting his wife humiliate me, but for the fact that their plan hadn't worked. It wasn't our relationship he wanted back, but his place in my will. Leonard, I finally said, I will always love you because you are my son, but I can't trust you, at least not right now. But Dad, son, no, listen, I held up my hand, stopping him. Tobias can come visit me whenever he wants. I'll be happy to see him, but between us, we need time, a lot of time. Leonard looked like he wanted to say something, but then he just nodded and stood up. I understand, he said quietly. Thank you for at least listening to me. I walked him to the door. Before he left, he turned around. You know, Dad, Freya wanted to come with me today, to apologize in person. I talked her out of it. I thought it would be unpleasant for you. And you were right, I said. Some apologies are better left unsaid if they aren't sincere. Leonard nodded and walked out. I watched him get into his car and drive away. His visit left me with a strange feeling, a mixture of sadness, disappointment, and, oddly enough, relief. At least now everything was honest. Masks dropped, truth laid bare. The following Saturday, as promised, I went to Tobias's swimming competition. The boy performed well, taking second place in his heat. After the competition, Freya insisted that we celebrate his success together in the cafe. I agreed just for my grandson's sake. At the table, Freya was emphatically polite, but in her eyes I could see a poorly concealed hostility. When Tobias retreated to the restroom, she tried to talk to me about reconciliation. Everett, I know what I did was awful, she said in a low voice. But people change. I have changed, and I want our family to be together again. I stared at her, trying to find some sincerity in her words, but all I saw was cold calculation and falsehood. You know, Freya, I answered just as quietly, if you had really changed, you wouldn't be trying to manipulate me through my grandson. You'd recognize that you're not entitled to my money, and you'd stop seeing me as a purse on legs. Her face contorted with anger for a moment, but she quickly pulled herself together. You are mistaken. I am truly sorry for what I have said and done. Perhaps, I nodded. You're sorry you didn't get what you hoped for. The conversation was interrupted by the return of Tobias. He was so happy that we were all together that he didn't notice the tension between the adults. After lunch, I invited my grandson to come to my house the following weekend to put the radio together, as I had promised earlier. Freya didn't look pleased, but she didn't object. Apparently, she was afraid of looking bad in her son's eyes. I'll be there, grandfather, Tobias exclaimed. I'm so excited to see your new home. As I left, Freya followed me into the parking lot. You can't keep us apart forever, she said. We're family, whether you want us to be or not. Sonoan. Family, Freya, I replied, looking her straight in the eye, is those who love you for your own sake, not for your money or position. You were never family to me. You were a jailer who waited for me to die so he could get his hands on my inheritance. With those words, I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot, furious but powerless. On the way home, I thought about Tobias. The boy didn't deserve to suffer because of his parents' mistakes. I decided I would support him in any way I could. Help pay for college, set up a trust fund for him, attend all the important events in his life. But all that was separate from Leonard and Freya. I got a call from Odette last night. How was the competition, she asked. Tobias did great, I said proudly. Then I had a very tense meeting with Freya and Leonard. I told my daughter about the conversation with my daughter-in-law. She'll never change, Dad, Odette sighed. Freya will always see in people only what they can give her. I know, I agreed. That's why I've decided to stay away from her. But Tobias, he's different. He's a sincere, kind boy, and I don't want him to suffer because of his parents. What are you going to do? I'm going to support him, but separate from Leonard and Freya. Set up a trust fund for him that they can't control. I'll invite him over, spend time with him, show him there's a different path in life than the one his parents are on. You'll be a great grandfather, Odette said softly, just like you were a great father to me. Her words warmed my soul. Despite everything that had happened, I still had a daughter who loved me, and a grandson who saw me as a grandfather, not a wallet, and that was enough to continue to live life to the fullest without regrets about the past or fear of the future. It had been 3 days since our family dinner, which had turned into a real battlefield. 3 days that changed everything. I sat in the office of my attorney, Peter Blackwell, reviewing the documents he had prepared on my behalf. Every page was evidence of my final decision, a decision that robbed Leonard and Freya of what they had so hoped for. Everything okay, Everett? Peter asked, watching me read each line carefully. Yeah, I just want to make sure it's done right, I replied, looking up. It's important to me. Peter nodded. He'd been my lawyer for over 30 years, handling all the legal aspects of the business Priscilla and I had built from the ground up. He was there when we signed the papers on our first house. He was there when we set up trust funds for our children's education. He was there when I drafted the will after Priscilla died, and now he was helping me rewrite my family history. I understand, Peter said, and I can assure you that everything has been done perfectly. Once these documents are signed, your share of the water company will be taken over by Odette, with you as a consultant until you decide to retire completely. The house on Lakeview Drive will remain your property, but after, he hesitated, after you die, it goes to Odette. A trust for Tobias has been set up, and the money will be transferred there within the week. Neither Leonard nor his wife will have access to those funds until Tobias is 21. And the house they were living in now, I asked, even though I already knew the answer. You will formally notify them to pay market value rent or vacate the premises within 30 days, as we discussed. Peter handed me another piece of paper. This is the notice I prepared. You can send it by post or hand it over in person, as you prefer. I took the document and ran my eyes over it. Dry legal language laying out the facts that would turn my son and his family's life upside down. I felt a prick of regret, but quickly suppressed it. Leonard had made his choice when he let Freya make plans for me. Now he must live with the consequences. I'll mail it, I decided. A face-to-face meeting right now. Not a good idea. Peter nodded understandingly. He knew everything that had happened. I told him about Freya's overheard conversation, about her plans to declare me incompetent, about the humiliation I'd endured living in their house. Peter wasn't just my lawyer. Over the years we'd worked together, he'd become a friend, one of the few people I trusted completely. Anything else, I asked, looking through the rest of the papers. Yes, right here, Peter pointed to the last page. It's an addendum to your will. It completely excludes Leonard from inheriting the principal estate. He'll receive only a token amount, $1,000, so that he can't contest the will on the grounds that he was forgotten or not mentioned. Tough, I muttered. You can always change it later if you want to, Peter pointed out. Wills aren't carved in stone. I grinned. It was the sanity of my mind that Freya planned to challenge, which makes this step especially important, Peter said seriously. Now that you've officially transferred a significant portion of Odette's assets and set up a trust for Tobias, it will be much harder to challenge your decisions, even if someone tries to question your capacity in the future. I nodded. That was one of the main reasons why I had decided to act so quickly. I didn't know what else Freya was capable of in her quest for my money, and I wanted to protect myself from any possible attacks. Okay, I said, picking up the pen. Let's get this over with. I signed the documents one by one, the transfer of shares, the creation of the trust fund, the addition to the will, the notice to start collecting rent. With each signature, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. That's it, Peter said as I put the last signature down. I'll make sure that all the documents are properly registered and effective. The notice to Leonard and his wife will be sent out today. They'll receive it in 3 days. Thank you, Peter. I extended my hand to him. For everything. He shook my hand firmly. You're welcome, Everett. I'm glad I could help. And I think Priscilla would approve of your decision. She's always valued honesty and fairness above all else. I felt a lump in my throat at the mention of my wife's name. Yes, Priscilla would not have tolerated such treatment of me. She was always stronger than me, more determined. If she were alive, Freya would never have dared to behave the way she did. Leaving Peter's office, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I headed toward the lake, the place where Priscilla and I liked to walk in good weather. The day was overcast, gray clouds hanging low over the water, promising rain soon. But that didn't bother me. I put on my warm coat and walked along the shore, absorbed in my thoughts. What would Priscilla say about what I had done? Would she approve of my decision to disinherit my son? Would she understand my pain at his betrayal? I wanted to believe she would, but deep down, doubts gnawed at me. Priscilla had always been willing to forgive, always looking for the best in people. Maybe she could find a way to reconcile us, to put Leonard back on the right path without resorting to such drastic measures. But Priscilla isn't here. There is only me, an old man betrayed by his own son, forced to defend himself against those who should have cared for him. And I did what I thought was right under the circumstances. I returned home as the rain began to drizzle. The big empty house greeted me with silence. I turned on the light, put the kettle on, and sat by the window, looking out at the lake fading into the thickening dusk. The phone rang, snapping me out of my reverie. Dad, question mark. Odette's voice sounded excited. How'd it go? Did you sign the papers? Yes, honey, I answered. It's all done. Peter said they'll go into effect in a few days. And how do you feel about that? I pondered her question. How did I feel? Devastated, determined, free, all of these and more. Normal, I finally answered. It had to be done. I know, Odette said softly. I'm proud of you, Dad. Not everyone would have had the strength to defend themselves the way you did. Thank you, sweetheart, I smiled even though she couldn't see it. When are you coming over? Friday night, just like I planned. Roy Baxter called me today. Wants to meet on Saturday to discuss the transfer of business. He's a good man, I said. And a great businessman. He'll teach you a lot. I'm a little nervous, Odette admitted. I've never run a company of this size before. You'll be fine, I said confidently. You have everything you need: intelligence, determination, honesty. You'll learn the rest as you go along, and I'll be there to advise you. We talked some more about everyday things, and I felt a warmth spread through my body at the sound of her voice. Odette always had a way of cheering me up, even on the hardest days. The next evening, I got a call from Leonard. His voice sounded strange, strained. Dad, he said without preamble, we got your notice about the beginning of rent collection. Yes, I confirmed. I sent it yesterday. I didn't expect it to get here so fast. Dad, are you serious? I could hear the desperation in his voice. Are you really going to charge us rent for the house we've lived in for the last 10 years? The house I bought, Leonard, I reminded him. A house I paid for in full, without a dime from you or Freya. But we're your family, he exclaimed. Tobias is your grandson. And that's why I'm not evicting you immediately, I said, trying to speak calmly. I'm offering you a reasonable rent, below market. If you can't afford it, find a cheaper place to live. We can't move now, he sounded panicked. Tobias has school nearby, we have jobs. Dad, please, let's talk about this. Maybe you could give us more time? I sighed. Part of me wanted to give in, to give them a reprieve. But the other part, the part that still remembered how Freya had called me a burden, how she planned to declare me incapacitated, remained firm. 30 days, Leonard, I said. You have 30 days to decide what to do next. Either start paying rent or find another place to live. You can't do this to us. His voice was no longer desperate, but angry. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Leonard? I asked quietly. Put me in a house I bought myself? Let me eat at your table while your wife planned how to declare me incapacitated? Or maybe you mean the times she humiliated me in front of Tobias, and you kept quiet? There was silence. I could only hear my son's heavy breathing. I didn't know what she was planning, he said, finally muffled. I swear, Dad, I didn't know. You didn't know, or you didn't want to know, I asked. Have you ever wondered why Freya is so interested in my finances? Why she's always talking about my age and my health? He fell silent again, and I realized I'd hit the mark. Leonard had always guessed, just turned a blind eye to the truth. What should I do? He asked after a long pause, and now there was nothing but defeat in his voice. I can't afford this house without your help. And Freya, she'll be furious. It's your choice, son, I said. You can always find a smaller apartment. Or if you want, you can move in with me for a while until you get back on your feet. You, he sounded surprised. After everything that's happened? You're my son, Leonard, I said simply, no matter what. He was silent for a moment, considering my offer. And Freya? He finally asked. Would she too? Could she? I felt my insides clench. Even now, even after everything she'd done, he was still attached to her, still putting her desires above his own. No, I said firmly. Just you and Tobias. Freya will never set foot in my house again. Yeah, I have to think about it, he said. This is all too sudden. Of course, I agreed. You have time, but no more than 30 days. After my conversation with Leonard, I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the picture of Priscilla on my desk. Her clear eyes seemed to stare straight into my soul, asking a silent question. Was I doing the right thing? I didn't know the answer. I was doing what I thought was fair, protecting myself, protecting my possessions, protecting Tobias's future from his mother's greed. But part of me wondered if the price of that fairness was too high. On the third day after signing the papers, I woke up early in the morning to the doorbell ringing. Tobias stood on the doorstep with a backpack over his shoulders and a crying face. Grandpa, he said, throwing himself on my neck. Can I stay with you? Please. I hugged him, feeling his heart pounding. What's wrong, grandson? I asked, walking him into the house. Do your parents know you're here? They're fighting, he said, wiping away his tears. Always fighting about money, about the house, about you. Mommy says Daddy should make you change your mind. And Daddy says he can't. And they scream and scream and scream. I felt anger boiling up inside. Using a child as a battlefield was low, even for Freya. Of course you can stay, I said, hugging him. But we need to call your parents so they don't worry. I left a note, Tobias said. I wrote that I was coming to see you. I nodded and took him into the kitchen, where I fed him breakfast. Tobias ate in silence, still depressed. I didn't question him further, giving him time to calm down. After breakfast, I called Leonard to let him know I had Tobias. Sassum, thank God, he breathed out. We were beginning to worry. Is he okay? Yes, I answered. But he's upset. He said you and Freya were fighting all the time. Leonard sighed. That's true. Freya, she can't accept your decision. She says I have to do something to convince you. And when I said I couldn't, that it was your right to manage your money, she exploded. I'm sorry about that, I said sincerely. But maybe it's for the best. Maybe now you see what she's really like? Maybe. His voice sounded tired. Listen, can Tobias stay with you for a couple days? While Freya and I, figure things out. Sure, I agreed. He can stay as long as he needs to. After talking to Leonard, I went back to Tobias, who was sitting in the living room, leafing through the book I'd given him about robots. Did Dad say I could stay? He asked hopefully. Yes, grandson. I sat down next to him. You can stay as long as you want. He pressed himself against me, and I put my arm around his shoulders. We sat like that for a while, staring at the fire in the fireplace. I thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought us here, me, my grandson, my family. I thought about the money that had become the apple of discord, the cause of the destruction of relationships. I thought about Priscilla, who always said that material possessions were worthless if they didn't bring happiness. She was probably right. But I didn't regret the decision. It was necessary, not only to protect my assets, but also to protect my dignity, my freedom of choice. And if that decision had led to the collapse of Leonard's marriage, then perhaps that marriage had been built on sand from the beginning. 3 days that changed everything. 3 days that broke some bonds and strengthened others. 3 days that showed true faces and true intentions. And now, looking at Tobias cuddled against me, seeking comfort and protection, I knew I'd done the right thing. For him, for Odette, for myself. Money can destroy a family, it's true. But it's not the money itself that's to blame. It's the greed it brings out in people. And if what I did expose that greed, showed it in all its glory, then maybe in the long run, it would save my family or what was left of it.